So Stephen, just so you know, there are a few beer class graduates sneaking in. So
you didn't tell me there were going to be ringers on this,
I
Jamie.
had
I'm
no
not prepared
clue.
for that.
I thought they were all doing something else. So.
That's all right. It's nice to have them aboard indeed.
There you go.
All right, Jamie, the floor is all yours.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Annie. So, welcome one, welcome all. I'm not watching my count on the side here, but I see way too many familiar faces. You guys do know you graduated, right? So, there are some beer class alumni out there and alumna, and they might cheat on a couple of the early quizzes, but we will talk about beer tonight. And more importantly, if you're looking for Fred Bauman's talk, you drifted into the wrong room, because the original title for this was Drinking with Friends. This will be about 90 minutes, thereabouts. But as we say in the business, there's nobody after us, so we still have the room. So Stephen and I are happy to continue talking and drinking as long as you want. I see a couple people are sneaking ahead with a couple of beers. Hold off. There's going to be a formal drinking session as we get to this. I usually play for my classes that are remote a little bit of music just to take care of Kenyon time at the top of the hour till 10 after. Every now and then students appreciate my taste in music. And I did have a few picked out, but we're sharing so many screens here and you're going to watch an old guy fiddle with technology. I'm going to leave that, but I'll continue to pratter on here just for a little bit, because I still see people coming in the door. In the meantime, if we haven't met, I'm Professor Jamie Keller. I teach chemistry at Kenyon. I have since 2000, so only a few of you are too old to have seen me here. Welcome, and I'm happy to be in the Kenyon family, and always happy to participate in alumni events. A few years back, we did a beer session for alumni events that wasn't nearly so good, because we didn't get to drink with each other and have a good time. But today I hope we can fix that, and maybe this will become a regular piece of this. If you haven't realized already, I do teach the beer class, sometimes called Beer Lab, sometimes called Fermentation Science, usually in the chemistry department. On those rare times I take a sabbatical, some biologist has to fill in. But I'm very pleased to be here and share the little bit of knowledge and fun that I have. But mostly we're going to use some information that you have and some experiences that you have. I want to introduce my co-host, Stephan Hale, from the class of 82. We do have an expert in the room, so I've been faking it for 20 years, but we have a real brewer, a brew master, I call him. Stephan, introduce yourself and say a little bit.
Thank you, Jamie. Hi, everybody. Glad you made it tonight. This is going to be a lot of fun. It feels a little bit different to be doing these now that many things have opened up. I work in St. Louis for the St. Louis Brewery, LLC now. It started as an incorporation 30 years ago. We're hitting our 30th anniversary this year. And I can thank Kenyon College for being in the beer industry, because when I was a student, I think it was mostly senior year, I was brewing and they weren't so new back then. And I understand some are still left, the new apartments. And right across the sidewalk thing was Dan Kopman, class of 83. We were the only student homebrewers on campus. Perry Lentz, English teacher, was a local, the only other local in Gambier who brewed beer. And a few years after college, Dan had worked for breweries in England and Scotland, and he moved back to hometown of St. Louis, opened a brewery, invited me to move from New England, sight unseen, to St. Louis to help be the assistant brewer. And other than helping a brewery open in Maine, a few years after that, I've been in St. Louis all of the 30 years. So I've been with Schlafly that whole time, opening that one location. We now have 3. Has anyone ever been to one of the Schlafly locations in St. Louis? I have to look around the Hollywood squares here.
You can lie. He doesn't know. Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, that's okay. Everyone raise your hand. And I would say, I knew you guys looked familiar. That's outstanding. So, but for the most part, very few people don't live that far away from, let me rephrase that. Most people live within not too many miles from a brewery these days. Since when Schlafly opened in '91, there were just over 300 breweries in the country, and there are now, some of you may already know this, but the number is approaching 8,800 in the United States. It's a staggering number. I think there can be more as small neighborhood taverns that serve a local populace. So the store shelves have gotten increasingly crowded with shipping breweries. We do a bit of both. We run 3 pubs, soon to be a 4th in Highland, Illinois, and that'll be mostly a small brewery operation there, but mostly gathering place for locals, which is what beer is all about. It's the community aspect of it that really intrigues us so much, which brings us to one of these things too. So that's it. New Englander who moved to St. Louis, who's actually moving back to New England next year, separate subject, but still keeping my fingers connected to the brewing world. So can take questions later on things, and let's get on with the program, Jamie. Sounds great.
All right. That's an excellent introduction. We were trying to get Stephan to relocate to Central Ohio and bring his brewery with him. And I think he almost bit once, but perhaps New England is calling. So I have a screen.
Damn beer needs its own brewery. Some enterprising alum has got to do it someday.
So I have a screen to share. Let me know if this doesn't play nice. There we go. Cool. That looks like it worked. I'm going to open my other screen a little bit so I can see more of your faces. Some of you are hiding. I think the bandwidth is pretty good here, so feel free to turn your camera back on just so I can see your faces. There are a few questions we're going to start with that should be easy questions for the beer class graduates, although I know even teaching 200 level chemistry, everybody forgets everything from the last class. So maybe it'll take a little bit to get you to remember some things. It's a young crew mostly out there. I find myself saying that too often. So I was hoping that we'd lose 15 minutes trying to get you to use technology. We are going to use a poll EV technique, so you can all weigh in on a couple of early questions. And if it doesn't work, just watch, because it'll be on the screen. So you can also pretend you're doing it. You need either a phone, a tablet, or if you're good enough to open another browser, then that'll work. So the alumni staff has already saved my favorite proverb as things go. And so this is the way it works. If you have another device, or if you're careful enough to do it on another screen, you want to type in pollev, that's the letter E and V.com. If you write all the rest of it, you'll go straight to the quiz. If you just stop at pollev.com, it'll prompt you for my name and the numbers 544. If you get in, tell me where you're at. You just have to put, if your device has any touchscreen to it at all, just there we go. So the West Coasters, I hope, are going to start drinking a little later in the evening. Okay. I also find that my fat finger can't locate myself too easily. I was somewhere in the Midwest, but if you want to clear your answer, you can add it again, just to change in case you've forgotten where you are as it goes.
So sorry to get one of your old folks here. What was it? I found PolleEV, but what is it?
So pollev.com, and it'll prompt you for my name. So if you do the whole thing, pollev.com, it should say you want to join, and then you're supposed to type in James Keller, I believe it's lowercase, and then 544.
Okay.
And again, the screen you're seeing really shows people's results. So you can also play at home without having the buzzer in your actual hands. So as my faculty chairs want to say, I see about 6 responses and over 20 people in the room. So somebody's not playing. Come on. So there we go.
Yeah, I'm like the person who asked about the, I'm keeping up with you as much as I can. Okay, there it is. I'm getting there.
Oh, looks like I lost everything. All right. Well, that was just a warm up. Oh, there we are. Cool. Excellent. All right. So I'm glad to see we're not keeping people up too late, or else those who are across the pond haven't figured out how to get to pull EV. I'm glad you got here. It helps me to get a little bit of perspective on where things are at. And we go to we have 2 questions. This is not a lengthy quiz. Well, there's 1 essay response and 2 questions. So prepare your blue books. The next one, I hope the beer graduates do exceptionally well at. So you can start typing as many words as you like. I'm looking for words that describe a beer. Technically the flavor, but you can work on aroma, on taste, on anything you'd like. So there you go. So just keep typing. There's at some point in time at Kenyon, we teach small classes. My version of this product only gives me so many responses, so we lock out. But so there we go.
Should we be seeing them show up here?
On my screen, you might be able to see it shared. On the screen I'm sharing, you should be seeing it. Here, show responses. Look at that. Ah. Okay, hang on. Now I just lost it. This doesn't always work. Ah, great. Okay, now I'm going to have to get on with my phone and see what happened to the responses. Let's see here. Oh, there they are. Okay, sorry about that. I think you can see this on your own device. If not, you can see it here. I love these. These are very good descriptors. We can probably go straight to drinking at this point in time, since it looks like we have nothing to teach you between now and the time we'll work. This is a typical word cloud, so you see things get a little bigger if more people kind of peel in with that as a notion. And these are wonderful descriptors. Again, I see far too many people who know their beer in the room. So I'm gonna kind of fall back on a technique I learned in my remote teaching, which was we taped a lot of things in order to get content across. We worked both flip classes, asynchronously at times, and the like. And I did find that my best responses when I found an expert like Stephan Hale to come in and tell us about this. And I forgot to prep him for an 8-minute primer on styles. So instead I found my own. So sit back and this should just play.
If you've been confusing your Pilsners with your IPAs and Imperial Stouts, you need to meet up with Greg Engert. Greg has developed a flavor profile system. It's being used all over the country to help drinkers understand that beer is very much like wine. And we set him up with a self-professed beer hater, David Lead.
So, beer. I hate beer. I really do. I find it very bitter.
Beer's calling card for part of its history has indeed been bitterness. Mm-hmm. You know, hops. Hops are the thing that give bitterness to beer. There's no 2 ways around that. But luckily for us, there are a few different flavor categories out there. So the one that's probably most approachable or people would understand the best is the fruit and spice category, dominated by Belgian style ales. They tend to be on the sweeter side, and that's going to be represented by Cellar Door from Stillwater Artisanal. And then the next one, this is a beer called Madame Rose. It tastes more like, almost like a Burgundian red wine than it does like your typical beer.
And this falls into what category?
That's the tart and funky category.
I love that, tart and funky. So talk about some of the other categories that you have in your profile.
Crisp is a category that we like to use for any kind of those effervescent, refreshing beers like lagers and pilsners. Hop brings in the kind of pale ales and IPAs.
Bitterness.
That you don't love too much. Then we have malt-driven beers. These are beers that capitalize on the grainy qualities, toasty, nutty, caramelized, toffee-ish qualities. And then we go into roast. Roast is the stout, the porter. These taste like coffee and chocolate, latte, espresso, etc. And then probably one of the strangest categories in the last one is smoke. And these are beers that are produced with grain that's literally cooked over open fires, giving the grain and the resulting beer the flavors of the fuel. So it'll taste kind of smoky and meaty and spicy.
So are you up for a pop quiz?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to give you the name of a dish. You tell me what you would pair it with.
Sure.
Okay, shrimp and grits.
Love this with something that's peppery, got a good fruit and spice quality. So we're thinking the fruity, spicy beers. Triples are fantastic with this, Belgian-style triples.
Spicy beef chili.
Alcohol and bitterness will make spice intensify on the palate. So what we want to do with something spicy is use something crisp that can kind of wash away the intensity of heat, or something sweet like a malty beer that's going to also temper the flames.
A stout cake, which is a cake made with Irish stout.
Typically, if you have a chocolatey cake, maybe we're going to bring in a sweeter, fruitier beer.
Excellent. These are wonderful ideas.
The Splendid Table is a weekly edition, I believe, from Minnesota Public Radio, those of you up in the far north. This was first aired in 2013, again in 2014, all audio. If you're interested, go to the Splendid Table, and they have about an 8-minute segment. He gets into a little bit more detail on his system as it works out. This is the short form that made it to YouTube in 2017. So that was an interesting set of categories. There's not the categories I typically put beers into, and so I was pleased to see this as it worked out. All right, you're not off the hook yet. You do have a couple more questions before we get hot and heavy into thinking about doing your own description of beers. There it goes. All right, you're still on your Poll EV, hopefully, which means that this should now come live on whatever device you're working on. So the BJCP is the Beer Judge Certification Program. In the US, at least, these are the folks who maintain styles. Those of you who are graduates of the class know well that styles are important. They're not of the utmost importance. You can brew out of style, but it's best if you know that you're brewing out of style. So what I'm curious here is whether you can now recognize which of the four that are here actually are recognized by the BJCP. All four of these are brewed on a regular basis. Some of these are newcomers. Some of these are quite old. Some of those you might have had. So,
Which one is recognized?
are you brewing any of these, Stephen?
At one point or another, at least the middle two. Braggots are not something we've done when we've made mead, and we have made a variety of meads over the years.
Yeah.
We have made several New England or Northeast hazy IPAs, but not a brute specific.
Sure.
I don't think.
So Stephen has hit upon one of the tricks here. These are, I hate these multiple choice questions as well. I never use them, even in my classes. So braggot is a perfectly good style. It is recognized by the BJCP, but in 2015, they split it off the beer list and they created a separate mead list. So it is recognized, but I didn't count it because it's not recognized as a beer style. But many would argue it is somewhere in between a beer and a mead. It uses both barley and honey. So it's a cool drink. But if you pick braggot, you got to clear your answer and try something else. So.
Yeah, a beer made with mead or a mead
made with beer. So,
well, made specifically with wort. So it's fermented because
yeah.
As probably everybody here knows, beer is made from 4 basic ingredients. And before the yeast gets to it, basically in the sugar shack, otherwise known as the mash tun and the brew kettle, brewers or brewsters, which is a term that would apply to many people on this call, and my wife, they make the wort in the brew house. Cool it down, add the yeast. And I don't think I'm jumping ahead and giving away answers to any quiz.
That's okay. That's okay. So somebody's cheating. The answer key must have made it out. So you've done well. So an oyster stout is brewed regularly, and I always thought this was a New England event, but a little bit of research showed that an oyster stout did start in England and has been brewed for centuries. But it is not a style that's recognized. People who brew oyster stouts and enter them in competitions have troubles. They try and enter them in the sweet stout category, which is the British style. But if they create a drier oyster stout, it's very difficult. They end up just sort of calling it experimental. The brewed IPA is a newcomer. I think it was first brewed, Stephen will correct me, in 2018 or maybe just a few months before. Many brewers were using an amylase enzyme to just help kind of kick the sugar. That if the yeast putters out and there's way too much sugar to get through, you would throw in a little amylase, and it would do what some of you brewers know, the same thing that it does in the early part by breaking starches into sugars. It would break the sugars, the complex sugars, into simple sugars that the yeast could easily work on. And just before 2018, or in the early months of 2018, Kim Sturdivant put a lot of the amylase enzyme into one of his IPAs, and he came out with something that was the degrees there are Plato, but you know those as specific gravity. So 0 degrees Plato is essentially water. That would be 1.0 gravity. And the style that does exist for these, the BJCP, has not recognized it yet, but the Great American Brew Festival does. And the style suggests that the final gravity should be somewhere between 0.97 and 1.04, which means it's actually lighter than water. So with enough ethanol, you can get something that has a density that's less than water. So this is incredibly dry, but then actually effervescent. So the brewed IPA apparently came about because he first called it a champagne IPA, realized that was going to get him into trouble, tried to call it an extra brut, and that got shortened to a brut. And this is sort of picked up. The brewed IPA, as you can see around, it's an acquired taste. It's very interesting because there is no backbone. It's thin as can be, but it's got actually a lot of flavor to it. So Agosa was the right answer, and this is a beer that almost died out. It was a steadfast in Lower Saxony, and later it migrated to Leipzig, and that's where they took it on as kind of their beer style of choice. It took quite a while for this to get bottled and distributed anywhere to become anything other than a local beer. It is sour. It's got a lactic acid to it. They add coriander and enough salt that you can really taste it. So it's just a salty, sour beer that the locals absolutely adore. And it's making a comeback. The whole sour beer, wild fermentation industry has picked up on this and picked up some historical styles. And so that one is well established, originally written as an historical style, but now it's a registered style in the BJCP. I'm trying to get my next slide here. Oops, sorry. The Oyster Stout again started in England with Guinness. People first just sloshing their stout or porter into an oyster shell and supping it down, and that didn't take long before someone decided to put at least the shell, if not the entire animal, into the beer. Those crazy brewers, and it's worked just fine. The reason I think it doesn't have a style is it's sort of done with both sweet stouts and dry stouts. I think someone's even tried to do it with a milk stout. The Brits don't like that term. And then a braggot, as we suggested before, is an old drink, back to the days of Chaucer, but it's really kind of half beer, half mead. So, all right, one last question. Okay. American beer styles. We are rather patriotic. Americans have taken a number of styles and adapted them, and they've started some styles. And these are current American beer styles. Some of those, again, you may have drunk. One of these is not like the others. So steam beer is also called California Common, and it's got a very unassuming yeast that typically goes with it, that almost every brewer knows how to use. So you can go to the spaghetti factory in San Francisco and you can still drink this beer. You're supposed to be erasing your A's. This is a very common current beer, the steam beer. My first beer of choice was Anchor Steam's Liberty Ale. It's their IPA, their hoppier version. But it didn't, even though it was brewed on the West Coast, didn't have a full out West Coast sea hop fanaticism to it. All right, very nice. My brew class just brewed a cream ale against my best wishes. You former brewers know all about my best wishes. They very rarely are heated. I handed out a sheet of things we couldn't brew this spring. We were running out of time. We had to get through the quiet period and then brew in time for the beers to mature. So I was throwing out all sorts of heavy beers and, of course, fruit beers. And I pretty much put a line through the cream ale, and they said, "Why?" I said, "Because I don't like them." And that was all I had to say. And then we brewed a cream ale. So so this year we did brew a cream ale. All right. It's a dead tie. All right. Once again, steam beer is the wrong answer. So if a few people change their mind there, you can move on. This is just what we do in class, right? We get there we go. Okay. The beer that I haven't seen in a very, very long time is a Kentucky Common. A Kentucky Common is a type of cream ale. It was just a very local cream ale. Cream ales in particular, there isn't a whole long litany here, just me for a few seconds. Cream ales were brought about really to compete with the lagers. They were faster to brew, and you could churn them out, and for marketing purposes alone, you could work them. Their adjunct typically was corn, so they had a very interesting corny note to them. And I guess we'd have to go back to some of your grandfathers to actually understand or have an appreciation for that pre-prohibition corny flavor that showed up in beers of the time. And they were very heavy in the cream ales of the time. Currently, cream ales kind of taken a different turn. They don't have that much in the way of adjuncts, and they tend to move toward farmhouse ales. So a lot of people will brew something with a cream ale profile, but they'll use a yeast that's a little bit more aggressive and more interesting as it goes. The Kentucky Common was a cream ale, local to regional Kentucky. I think they could brew it in 8 days. That's not weeks, that's days. Full turnaround from in the boil pot to drinking was 8 days. There's a good reason this one didn't survive. There are recipes if you're interested. I spent way too much of my youth trying to recreate something from Charlie Papazian that was born of a 6-row malt barley, and he added maize, added corn to it on purpose to give it a little character, really just to cover up the horrible flavor coming out of that 6-row. And it never worked. I tried and I tried and I tried. And maybe the Kentucky Common people did the same thing. All right. So open question, there's no more poll EV. You can shut your device down as it works out. Have you seen this beer before? I didn't know about this. I've seen it many, many times before, but I didn't know about it till I started doing research for today's talk. So movies and TV shows like to do product placement. They do it for a price. And so you see, M&Ms, you see Reese's Pieces on ET, you see all these sorts of things. You rarely see brand name alcohol, beers and alcohol. And there's two reasons. I guess they don't want to pay for it, but also usually the character who takes down about a 6-pack of beer is in the midst of doing something rather, shall we say, not so nice, or about to go out and kill somebody. So they don't want their brand associated with that. So this is actually a famous movie prop. This is not a beer. It is, it's just the most famous prop we have for beers. So there's a whole listing of shows you may have seen this in. Apparently they drink it all the time on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, enough to have to go back for more. So it's not a beer. It's, it's just a prop, as that goes. All right. So you've reached that point in time. And I think we will split up, just for no other reason, to make certain people get a chance to actually talk as we go around. If you followed the rules, if you don't know the rules, then Stephen and I will explain them to you. You're going to have to rush to the fridge and find something. This was Stephen's idea, and I love it, to drink something yellow, something brown, something black, and something other. All right. And we won't be judging you if you drink something kind of brown during the yellow round, or something other than that.
Hey, Jamie.
Yeah.
Before we split off, I should say a couple of quick things, and that is, I think I chose the wrong beer for the yellow, because I thought I had some Schlafly Kolsch here, and it is a gold medal Kolsch. It beat out 2 German beers at the World Beer Cup years ago.
All right.
It uses a yeast strain from the Gaffel Brewery in Cologne, Germany, and that is a beer drinking hallmark experience. Highly recommended if you can do it. I do have the iconic Kolsch glass. It's called a Stange. It holds a little under 7 ounces.
I'm glad I brought mine too. I'm so pleased.
5 of these equals a liter. And for my yellow beer, I was going to use a home brew I made just over 2 weeks ago. It turned out a little darker than I wanted in the glass. This should be a lot lighter and yellow in color. And Jamie, if you can block your ears so I can tell everyone else that I brewed a cream ale, because I love the style when it's done right. One of the iconic beers of my Kenyon experience was Little King's Cream Ale, and those adorable 7-ounce bottles made by Hudebol Schindling in Cincinnati. So my neighbor and I each brewed a cream ale. I brewed all extract because I want to know how to brew on a catamaran, which is my future living sometime next year. And
excellent.
It just turned out a little darker. I used some corn. I will use less next time. And I use a yeast strain that is a topic unto itself. It's the Norwegian strain called Kveik. They ferment really warm. They ferment really fast. We don't need to get into that now. So this is in keg, not quite carbonated enough. I could have made this ready to drink a few days ago, but so bright glass, wrong color, my almost yellow beer. So
I love it.
Wanted to share.
But the good news is it took more than 8 days, so I think we're cool. So I almost brought a cream ale for my yellow beer. The Mance family stopped sending people to Kenyon. I early on told the whole family that they just needed to kick out a few more siblings to keep up the string. But I did get a regular spring delivery of Spotted Cow, which they call a cream ale and I call a farmhouse ale, because in my mind it separates itself from the other creams. I had to send my daughter to live in Wisconsin, and now she works there just because my beer supply stopped. The New Glarus folks do not tend to deliver outside of state without duress. So she knows to bring it back to me on a regular basis, and she just visited, so I do have some, but that should work out. All right. So the way we're going to do this, it's now 8:35. Is we're going to pop into rooms. I found my beer class can get through an astounding number of beer tastings in only a half an hour if we finish our talks at 3:30 and someone has to be on the athletic field at 4. But we'll give you about 15 minutes or so, Stephen, and then you and I will switch rooms. It'll be easy. I'll just come into your room and then I'll kick you out. So you'll stay in the room that you're assigned. You'll get an invite in just a moment until we get through all 4 beers. If you only brought 1 beer, drink it slow. If you brought more, then you may have to stay after class. But we will start with yellow, move to brown, and work from there. Stephen?
So I should try to talk about 4 beers in the
No,
room.
2. You get through 2 and then I'll
2?
come in and then you can, so you do yellow and brown and hopefully I'll be there before we get to black.
It always took extra instruction from me, from my professors, so.
All right, I'm gonna do this automatically. So I didn't pick you if you ended up with people you don't like. Just blame the administration. Stephen, you can have room 1 and I'll go into room 2. Do you see that, Stephen? If the breakout room should be on your screen and you should be able to join. Oh no, you're already in room 1. Okay. Interesting. All right. Cool. So Annie, Gordon, Trevor. I don't know what Trevor. Trevor's getting his beer. Trevor, go to your room. So, Annie Gordon has found her way out. So the only problem we have here is Stephen just kind of came in he didn't treat himself like a co-host. So I will be able, I think, since I created the rooms, this is the same problem. Since I created the rooms, we're in trouble. So at some point I'll move him when I'm ready to move. I'll probably catch him mid-thought, but this should work. This should work brilliantly. So do you want to come join us? Do we have a room for you? Let's see. How do I get you into a room? Annie made it. That's strange. Huh. We're lost. This happens with my kids all the time. If they can't make it in, I just say go home.
Don't worry about it. We've had a couple late arrivals, so I don't want so if someone joins now, then I'll be able to get in touch with
back. I'll be back in 10 minutes or so anyway. So
go for it. Hi there. They just broke out into some breakout rooms, so let me get you into one, okay? Oh, bear with me here just a moment. Frederick, I don't know if you can still hear me, but you should have an invite at the bottom of your screen to join the breakout room. Did you see that?
Dr. Keller, I was going to say you were talking about trying to pull people from moving towards biology, but you managed to pull me from straight biology, and now I'm in purely physical chemistry.
The other room is still chatting, so they're jumping over here in a minute.
You're muted, Dr. Keller.
I'm supposed to be expert at this by now. We were so chatty, we didn't quite get to the last beer, so I'm just pouring mine now. So, oh, okay, there is fruit in this. This is going to be hard. The descriptor, I had this. This is from a Cincinnati brewer, Rheingeist, and they make incredible stuff. They make Truth, which we have fallen in love with because it's what they serve at the VI as a default, I think. I don't know if they just have an open tap or they just keep pouring something else and calling it Truth because anybody will pay for it. But Rheingeist makes some really interesting barrel aged things. And I had one the other day, which was about 5 months ago. And my wife wants to know why that empty bottle is sat by the side of the sink for 4 months. And it's because I don't want to forget about it. So I went out to get it and they didn't have it, but they had something close. But it's got orange peeled cherries and cinnamon. And the cherries are really strong. So I'm just going to sit here and sip this gently. It's good to see everybody back. So.
Jamie, I hope you were nice to my first group. We had a great time.
Hey, Stephen, I didn't realize that I could throw you out of a room so quickly, or I would have done it earlier. It was so much fun. I thought you had to be asked, and I just could fling you from place to place. So
I can't believe it took this many years for me to get kicked out of a classroom at Kenyon. It should have happened much sooner. So yeah, that was great. Thank you. It finally happened.
So I accused my original room of slowing down. I don't know if you added some spice and got them drinking. I got to say that I did not push your room very hard. So we're only starting our 4th beer. So we're just going to sit and drink our 4th beer for a while.
We should have almost planned it this way because we did a speed sharing of those who had a 4th beer, at least to show what they would drink if they were not actually drinking it. So since I'm blathering, I will show you that I am about to open a Boysenberry Power Oak. It's from what we call the Ibex cellar. The Ibex is a Swiss mountain goat.
Yeah,
it's an iconic image at the original location downtown. And this is also fun. I like to share this. This is a bottle opener that I inherited from my parents, stainless steel. And what's really interesting about it is the way it opens the bottle. The crown is still fully intact. Oh. And then you can set it back on and then using this part of the opener.
But why would you ever need to do that?
Because you've got to go to your chemistry class or something like that.
So we don't have time to talk about my senior lab and the fact that I was old enough to go to the pub lunch just beforehand, but I am excited by that because it looks like we've had several students interested in making the old coffee table out of beer caps, and that looks like it would take it off much better than what we did. So that's a pretty looking beer.
So again, and I think I touched on this in both of the breakout rooms, that the suggestion I had made when we were planning this event of yellow, brown, and black and other is not meant as a disservice to beer, but I challenge most brewers to tell me of another beer color. The other can be the fruit color, or I'll just say that they're all yellow, brown, and black plus fruit. That can be the other. And the brown is really more amber, many shades of amber on that sliding scale of beer. They just, unless you add Woodruff syrup to your Berliner Weiss, which I told one of the groups, and make it green, you're pretty much looking at mostly yellow. But this Boysenberry Sour Oak is this lovely off-red.
That is a lovely story. Every red beer I've tried to make does not turn out very red, so as some of you will attest to. Maybe I'll have to add some fruit to it.
I think if you use cockroach bodies or something, I was told that would work.
The rye, we did a rye IPA, and it added some red notes to it because I added way more rye than I had intended to. But good beer, actually.
Hey, I want to hear from anyone who has questions, or I'm not going to ask for suggestions yet. Maybe that's in the postlude, as it were. So,
Well, first, I see Eric's actually got out of the car and is starting to drink, so I want to see what he's working on. So tell me what you're drinking.
So this is Sappo Reserve, all the way from Japan.
Hey.
I don't know about that. It is apparently 100% malt. I don't believe them, but it kind of tastes like wet bread. So sounds like.
I don't know why you wouldn't trust them. You know,
100% malt.
All malt.
There you go. Well, Stephan will attest, and I didn't send you those readings, but it's a little interesting to watch the economic side of this. So the Japanese and Chinese distributors are taking over the world. So what am I thinking?
Doesn't a Japanese consortium own Anchor Steam now?
Yeah, it's Kirin, right? That's Japanese, and they took over Anchor Steam. Which is amazing because Anchor Steam was run, as some of you know, by Fritz Maytag. So they already came from a conglomerate with plenty of money and whimsy, and he didn't think they need to be bought out for anything. But they claim it hasn't changed the nature of the beers. It's the same thing happens in single malt scotches, right? Those have all been taken over by dominantly either Japanese or Chinese interests. And it's a question of how it works. I mean, it might be good news. It might just mean better distribution for all of us. So,
Well, I know I lived in Beijing for a year and a half after. Sorry, cat. I lived in Beijing for a year and a half after college, and Beijing had actually. I traveled around a lot of the major cities, and Beijing had a lot of microbreweries and small distribution.
All right.
Which was incredible. A lot of them started by Americans or mostly Americans, but lots of really great beer in Beijing if anyone's going.
Outstanding.
Have a list and a brewery tour through the city.
All right.
So if anyone wants that, hit me up. But Qingdao Brewery down in southern China was a partnership with Germany and brewing German beer.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me, and we might talk about it a little bit later, but just the continued expansion of this industry is astonishing to me. I mean, it's tied into so many new concepts, whether it's local foods or it's just heritage beers going back to old styles, or whether it's experimental beers thinking about something that nobody's ever brewed before. There just doesn't ever seem to be a cap to this. It's just there's a thirst for it.
You mean brewing a beer with peanut butter and jelly, Jamie?
Well, you got to try something. So.
Sorry, Kay. Hey, Jamie, I did want to mention, I didn't get a chance before. Schlafly teamed up with the Dry Ground Brewing Company in Paducah, Kentucky, probably 6 years ago or 5 years ago, to brew a Kentucky Common, or our version of it, a one-off batch. And the brewery there wanted to name it after me, so they called it Hale's. Hale. They called it Dry Ground Brewery was named because during a flood eons ago, the water came to that point. It was an old Coca-Cola bottling plant.
Yeah.
That's how far the floodwaters got. So I think that's why the Coke plant was built there. And then it was converted after it closed to this little brewery, which has done great things. And they called the beer Hale or High Water.
Oh, I love it.
Brewers like to have fun with names and stuff.
That's good.
It was a one-off, Kentucky Common-ish, but not commercial production again.
I wish I'd known about that. So I almost subjected you to the whole 8 minutes of our Washington beer style expert. And I had, as something to keep you occupied, just his 7 categories and different beers that corresponded to those categories. And of course, I added a Keller beer, which is my favorite category. I've only had the beer once. I don't know how I like it.
Unfiltered Pilsner.
Yeah, but I looked carefully for anything that had actual Hale in it. I couldn't find it. A lot of Helles, but I couldn't get Hale. But now I know there is a Hale beer. That would have been good to know.
Well, there's a Hale's brewery in or near Seattle.
Yep.
Wait, I have to look. My screen has changed now. Is that Corey, Seattle?
They probably moved around. Corey's from Seattle right now.
Is there it's either, I think it's Seattle. Is there Hale's Ale still there?
Not one that I've heard of, but I've only been here for a few months.
Okay.
It's on Leary Way in Seattle.
Ah, excellent.
Thank you, Heath.
Very helpful, Heath. Thank you.
So Corey says he's from Seattle, but I think he raided some vault to get that Rainier can that he's been drinking.
Right, because they went out of business, didn't they?
I do, along with Bush. I don't know. I just like he just took me back to the 70s, just like that. So
they may have been bought out, but they're everywhere.
I thought it was Rainier that was closing up shop. I just hear too many different stories.
Maybe too many stories. So if anybody else is drinking an other beer that they didn't get a chance to talk about, chime in or ask away. You have an expert in the room, that's Stephan, and some prompts as it worked out. Again, I'm enthralled by the fact that the beer culture has taken hold in so many communities, large and small. You don't have to be in a big city. And they're trying their best. I think they probably try to put peanut butter in the beer on Gay Street as well. So it seems too obvious. I don't know. It doesn't seem obvious to me, but
yeah, once you think you've heard all of it, there will be something else, and some of them can become a hugely popular.
So what's your favorite crazy beer? The chili beers, who knew, are outstanding. The Oyster Stout, I still can drink. There are some
chili
really
beers.
wild.
There were lots of chili beers in Asia.
Oh, I bet.
They were very, very good.
Yeah, they're outstanding. It's a great pairing.
We also have a lot of green chili beers here in Colorado for Poblano. One brewery that I went to had a competition between the Poblano and the Haymitch, which are the two green chilies that kind of are in competition. So
why do I have
my chili beer? Highly recommend.
Why do I have my geography off? I thought that was more of a New Mexico thing to do the whole green chili
Colorado's
thing.
like the west, southwest. Like we don't really know where we belong.
Okay.
Well, and actually, so there is a distinction. There's a big competition between
Haymitch, which is New Mexico,
and Hatch, which is Colorado green chili.
And Pueblo, which is also Colorado green chili.
Well,
we got a lot of green chili down here.
I'm a fan. That's all I can say. I was only a few years ago, I went that direction, and I'm a huge fan.
So I mentioned earlier Chattanooga Brewing Company, which is obviously in Chattanooga. I went there. They have food there as well, and I went with some friends, and they had I don't know what you would describe it. It was like the on sale beer, I think, because no one was buying it. But it was a habanero ale, and I like spicy food, and I tried it, and it was like one of my favorite beers I've ever had. And I wonder how many people are turned away just by the concept of it. And I, and like I said, I like spicy food, so that probably helps. But I thought that it really, the sort of melding of the spice and the kind of hoppiness, of course, alcohol. I thought it was a really good. I just, drank more than I needed to. But it was really good. And I was sad when they ran out of that batch amount.
Well, Corey, who just left, and I actually tried ourselves to brew tapache, which is like a pineapple, and we put like serrano peppers and tried to ferment it. And I think we just made vinegar, very spicy vinegar.
Tap water, pineapples, and a single chili in a bottle, having it under your bed for a month technically counts as trying to brew. But I
I think we ended up mixing it with other things to make it potent, but it was very spicy.
Yeah, we stole some of that lab grade ethanol from the science building.
There you go. There you go. Well, Junie has some seltzer you can add to it just to lighten it up a little bit.
Yeah.
So. Not too bad.
Yeah, that seltzer category is too hot a topic to broach at this point. The only pepper story I have to share is a few months after we opened, we were at my apartment here in Soulard where I live, and the Mardi Gras parade went by the house, and Ed's Cave Creek chili beer was popular back then in 91, 92. So we thought we'd make our own version and took some peppers and simmered them in water and then cooled that down and added it to the pitcher we were pulling off the keg of beer. And Tom Schlafly, the founder, who's still a beer drinker, tried one, took a sip, looked at us, and he said, "If you ever brew this at the brewery, you're fired." So we never brewed anything like it until several years ago when we realized you can make good pepper chili beers, pepper beers, whatever they are, with flavor, but not unacceptable heat. They can have different levels of heat, but it has to have good flavor. And I would agree and enjoy one of those. But we still laugh about that comment because we drank it. It was, you took a sip of the beer and it was too hot and you needed to quench your thirst. So you took another sip of the beer. You kept going. Terrible. Cumulative, yeah.
My favorite like chili beer was probably the spiciest thing I've ever had, but it was at a chili festival, so it's excused. But it was a stout like chili beer. I still have dreams about it. It was smoky and delicious and very, very spicy. Very spicy.
That's a good style for it.
So I'm going to force you to do some work, right? You did your readings. It's actually 9:30, so if you can duck out of class. So one of the readings talked about both the Evan Rail reading as well as one of the others, A Sense of Place. So I love the little story in Paris. I think he should have taken the maitre d's idea of their house beer, but just any story of some place you've been that is memorable just because of the beer. So certainly we've heard about Beijing. Are there other stories out there that you remember fondly because of a particular beer taste experience or adventure? So.
This made me a little bit of the Ohio flavor, although I guess it's really Kentucky. But I lived in Columbus for probably 8 years. And the only place that I've ever seen this beer was at Woodlands Tavern in Columbus, but it was Kentucky Bourbon Barrel Ale. Yeah. And I don't know the full story, but I guess it's aged in bourbon barrels.
It's the theory.
Or so they say. Such is the claim. But I thought, I think it was relatively high alcohol content, but it just had a great flavor. And it's something the way our brains are wired, just like I can remember that flavor, and it just makes me think of Woodlands. So that's
cool.
Yeah.
So I took a class once, just a little further north to Akron. There's a fellow, he calls himself the Hopping Frog, is his beer brand. And he's a sole proprietor. He doesn't have a staff. He brings people in every Wednesday to help bottle. He's got this really fancy German-made bottling setup that bottles 2 22-ounce bottles at a time, purges with CO2, does the whole thing and kind of works it through. And he's found a market. He found a market in the Scandinavian countries, of all places. He makes the chewiest beers you can imagine. So what he makes is just one form of imperial stout after another. His favorite is called Boris, and I can't remember all the whole acronym, but it just stands up. You pour it. You don't need a glass. This stuff it's so thick. And in that dark winter of Scandinavia, they just love this stuff. So he can't brew it fast enough. And he really, like many breweries, need not brew anything other than just his flagship beer market-wise, but he gets bored. So he started experimenting. And when we came down, he was experimenting with the Kentucky bourbon infused Boris, this stout tossed into a barrel that I guess they didn't empty enough, because he filled the barrel and then he took it out and he tried it and it was too strong. So he diluted it, not once, but about 10 times. And then he gave us a taste and we said, you need to do another 10 times, because it was just like drinking bourbon. but it was a good pairing. And I've learned, that's what got me into this Rheingeist thing was a bourbon barrel, no fruit, but a bourbon barrel stout of theirs that I'm sold. It took a long time, but if you have the right beer, it's a cool thing to do.
Very popular for brewers to make bourbon barrel stouts. We put barley wine in a bourbon barrel, then emptied all those barrels, blended it 50-50 with our pale ale, packaged it as Kentucky bourbon ale, and sold it only in the Louisville market for several years. And it was sublimely delicious. The barley wine coming out of the bourbon barrels, which is not a common style you find, was nectar in itself, blended with the pale ale, was pretty damn fine too. But Hallmark beers, go to the Czech Republic, Prague. You can't go back in time and lower the Iron Curtain again, whatever's happening in the world. But enjoying a Czech Pils when the Iron Curtain was still down in 1987 was a lovely experience. And then not too many years later, having a pint of cask Fuller's Pale Ale at the Fuller's Brewery in London. To me, sort of our twin pillars, hallmarks of beer styles in the world. I didn't get to travel around Belgium too much. I don't know how you'd make up your mind there, but those two beers, Hallmark English Ale and a Pilsner, were really extraordinary. So do that if you can.
Those are really good choices. So what you did with that barley wines almost sounds like the three threads of old, right? Where you take the old beer and you mash it with the new beer and you mix them and kind of come up with it looked like a vintner coming up with the right blend.
There's a lot of blending like that. Not an uncommon thing at all. So
I don't see that often in beers. I mean, it's clearly what they do in every bourbon and many wines, but
hey, is there an ingredient in the Knox County, Central Ohio region that might be good in a beer?
That's an interesting point. I can advertise, and I maybe told you this, Stephen. We did in the past 9 months create the first dirt to beer experiment. So the Kenyon farm grew a winter barley, and it was malted in Cincinnati, I think. And then the fellow who was sort of highlighting that did brew a beer just 3 months ago. So we have something that was hopped with hops that were grown in Knox County, barley that was grown and malted in the state, grown in Knox County and malted in the state, and complete from start to finish. So
please tell me the water did not come from the cacao stand.
He's pretty good about, the water's pretty hard here, those of you who are paying attention to your chemistry. So he's pretty good about diluting it with DI water and then adding some salt. So it works out. Our water is variable. We get water in here that's purportedly half surface water, half groundwater, right? But you never know what they're doing on a given month. So it's like the stats are all over the board on when they're taking it from where. But the times it's mostly coming from the cacaosing are bad times. So.
What about when I lived in Columbus? As often as we could, we'd go down to Pawpaw Fest in Nelsonville, and all the breweries. I forget who all, like Jackie O's.
They've got, they're all down there.
But they, a bunch in Athens, which is nearby, but they'd all have Pawpaw themed
That's a good point.
beers, I guess. Yeah. I mean,
That's new.
It was awesome. And you know, if you've never had a pawpaw, you know, you're missing out. They're a pretty cool little niche fruit, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, one of the only like fruits like that that's native to that area, and they're got a nice flavor. I don't know. I guess they've never been marketed just because they're kind of difficult to produce on a large scale, but the beer's really good. So, and the fruit's really good. So if you get a chance, you should go down.
What's that, that road apple thing, that orange Asajj? Where are the biologists? So it's, there's something quite local. I don't think anybody's ever tried to put it in a drink.
Osage orange?
Yeah. So.
Got a blood orange.
Look at that.
That was my, at my local grocery store. They have a, you know, make your own 6-pack kind of thing. So it's like, if I'm going to buy 4 beers, might as well buy 6 beers.
See, most of us are drinking ourselves through 4 6-packs of beer now. You were very bright.
Yeah. I was lucky. I didn't have to, you know, drop, you know, $100 on various beers for the night. I don't know if I'm gonna crack this guy open because I do have to, you know, be productive tomorrow. But it did catch my eye as a potential candidate for the other category.
I like that.
Blood orange cider. So
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go get another category.
Okay. That guy could drink me under the table any night of the week. So. So about a month and a half ago, I tried to lose my COVID-15 on a stringent diet that has actually, I'm enjoying tonight more than you believe, because I haven't had beer, but I had reason to over the last week, and I'm coming to the disturbing conclusion scientifically that this is how I gain weight, is by beer. So I'm a little nervous about that. But,
No. It's all the Cheetos and other crap you eat and drink beer. Don't do that.
No,
Just drink
look,
beer.
I didn't even open up the bag. I'm just drinking. That's
So I've touched on Mead a couple of times, and maybe in some of the breakout sessions, but Mead, one of the oldest beverages known, oldest alcoholic beverages, honey, diluted, fermented. It's basically just water, honey, and yeast. And my wife, Sarah, who's helped, I've got help with my little 4-pack here, so I'm not drinking all of it. Sarah, who brewed as a brewster at Schlafly for 16 years, is helping me out with this. And we like to make mead at home. We brewed beer at work. We brewed mead at home. A, because it's really simple. B, because we're kind of lazy and it takes a long time to get ready, as in months or years.
Yeah.
But in May of 2004, on National Homebrew Day, we decided to make 20 gallons of mead. A 5-gallon glass carboy is the thing that's very popular with, thank you, Junie. Very popular with
my blackberry mead, made with blackberries from my backyard. So
nice.
We tried something in the fall, we decided we should let it age a little more.
Mead can age well. Our general routine was, it's a very short day to make it, 6 months in primary, 6 months in secondary, and then bottle or keg and let it age longer and try not to drink it too quickly. Well, during the pandemic, we had time to go down to our 4 carboys in the cellar from 2004. They were 16 years old. They were still in primary. One of them was for shite. The other 3 ranged from okay drinkable to really, really good. And since we're really cheap on the bottles we use, we just grabbed extra bottles for the mead. This is not Evan Williams. So the other here is mead.
All right.
And we think the ABV on this is about 14%. We like still, not pétillant or bubbly mead. It can be good. We drink it at pretty much room temperature or slightly chilled. And it's just sweet. You can really taste the honey. You can taste the full character of the nectar, as it were. So, and it's still good. That bottle was opened on Saturday at a beer festival.
So my question to the mead drinkers, we're going to let Stephan enjoy that and tell us about it, is how do you stop the fermentation? How do you not just go fully dry?
You go fully dry.
Okay,
because there's still enough residual flavor and sweetness in the mead the first time I made this, Jamie, sorry, Professor Keller.
Okay.
Right, I have to get the protocol right. It'll start your hydrometer, and these guys know hydrometers. Did you go through that in the beer lab? Yeah, the hydrometer floats in the jar, and it's way up here because there's so much sugar in it. And the first time I checked my gravity after a few months, eons ago, my first batch, the hydrometer sank to the bottom below zero. I had to guess at 0.995, which of course gives it a big ABV of about 14%. So I just let it go. Wine yeast, champagne yeast, 5 gallons, easy. Yeah, or the alcohol can stop the yeast too.
Because the vintners stop their fermentation, right? They add
potassium sorbate, I think.
Yeah, they add something to stop it. When they reach the point they want and want a little sweetness left, they stop it. And I never knew what mead drinkers did, so they just keep going, huh?
I like to make fun of my winemaking friends because they just work out in the fields and get tan and gorgeous all the time, and then stomp on grapes 1 month a year and bottle it. They're not doing anything else the other 11 months of the year, while the brewers are slaving away. I know that's not true. Right? Oh shoot, this is being recorded.
It is being recorded. Yeah, that's
Tell
it.
my winemaking friends I'm kidding, and they can have as much beer as they want.
You're not going to be re-invited back again. So.
Oh no. Yeah, I think I knew that a while ago anyway too. So that's the oldest supposedly fermented alcoholic beverage. I want to hear about Junie's Blackberry.
So what we bought the honey from a local apiary, I think is the
That's
term.
what they call them.
And I have about 6 acres. And there's just a bunch of blackberries that grow there naturally. And so I can't take too much credit for the collecting of the blackberries. That was mostly my girlfriend and actually one of my coworkers just, filled up jugs of, milk jugs of blackberries. And, I sort of looked around on the internet for, just to get some ideas for recipes, and they ranged from, very professional to very like, you drank that after you did, and so I kind of found my place somewhere in the middle. And I have it all written down somewhere. I don't remember off the top of my head the exact recipe that I followed, but I have, a couple different fermenters stages. And I think I did a primary for several months, and then I moved it over into the secondary for several months, and then bottled it, and we drank one. We went through one of we have, I guess, 5 of these guys, and we went through a couple of them, but they were still pretty bitter. And we thought, you know what, let's get on with, we got other things we can make and drink, right? And so it's probably been a while, 6 months maybe, since these have just, in addition to these, we have two or three of these left. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see how the flavors may have continued to meld and develop over time. And I, like I said, we have about 6 acres, and I'm all, and you were talking about the sort of all Ohio or local Knox County beer. And I don't think I'm quite at the ability brewing wise or, farm wise to do that kind of thing. But, I've thought about at least like flavoring things with, these are, we talked about the pepper beers, that kind of thing. Or actually, here's the real heartbreaking story. When we first summer we lived at this, where we live now, in the fall, there's like this musty frat house kind of smell. I was like, what is that? And we realized, the horses kept like eating, they were doing something over here. And we realized that there's all these little berries on the ground. We looked up, and there was a, big tree hanging over our property from the neighbor's property, but the limbs came over our property, and it has, where it had a bunch of muscadine grapes on it. And, gears start turning in my head, and I'm thinking, that would be really cool to make a muscadine wine from the grapes that grew, on our property. Well, that
Wait, I
winter,
thought you said they were hanging over your property. They were your neighbor's tree. So you'd have to give them the wine back to them?
I don't know. If they fall on my side of the fence, then so actually, we have there's precedent set here, because what ended up happening is we had a pretty bad storm that winter, and the tree fell. And I remember sitting there with my chainsaw, because the tree was on the ground all over the place. I remember cutting through that tree and just thinking, I'm also cutting through that vine. And that was pretty sad when that happened. And I hoped that maybe, I drug all the logs back into the back, and hoping that maybe they would kind of take root and go from there. But we planted some more muscadines, and we planted some elderberries, and we also have an apple tree growing, and I made an apple ale that was pretty good. So, I think it's awesome to try to include, whatever is, what's in the backyard. What can I include here in my beer? We got a lot of herbs going too, so I don't know if we'll get crazy with that.
So I hate to give you ideas, but one of my favorite class trips was down to Lancaster to the Rock Mill Brewery. This fellow was floating around Southern California as a foodie, interested in wine with no interest in beer at all. And he got kind of caught up in the beer food pairing while he was out there. And his folks have a place at the headwaters of a river system, starts in Lancaster. And so he came back, and this is an incredible property that they have. It used to be part of the Stagecoach line. So they didn't have the inn at their place, but the stables were there. So they have these stables on their property that go back, years and years and years to the early stage lines that came through. So they converted one barn into a brewery. They turned the other barn, they ripped the other barn down to turn it into adding on to the main house as a tasting room. And he started brewing Belgian beers, and they're astounding. And so from nothing, he had a 2-barrel brewery. He had a dual 1-barrel brewery. This is only a little bit bigger than our 5-gallon things. Just scale it up a little bit, and a few bright tanks. And he did phenomenal things. He now has a place in Columbus, because he's always been connected to food. So he always brought in chefs. They put a commercial kitchen in their spot so they could bring chefs from Columbus into the Lancaster and brew things up. But he's made a go of it from just a simple idea. So whenever you're ready to leave teaching, you're ready for it.
There we go. Yeah, one of my friends, he's an environmental science teacher at my school, and we were as I'm sure is true in a lot of professions, we were having that conversation one time of like, man, what are we gonna do? Like, we gotta think of, we needed some kind of, like, even if it was pure fantasy, some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. And we're like, all right, let's start a brewery. Like, I've got, I've got all the supplies to get us started. And, we started thinking about it. We started, we were kind of thinking like, just, it could at least be like a kind of just for fun thing, right? But the unfortunate thing is the legal side of selling your beer, I guess.
That's really easy in some states. Michigan's outstandingly easy. Ohio's getting easier. But it is a bit to navigate. There's a brewery, I think I mentioned it to Stephan, that opened up or tried to open up in Columbus that couldn't, because it was trying to get through the red tape. And so they ended up taking their fermenters and turning them into essentially yeast farm. So they started creating yeast for the Ohio brewers, and they went off like gangbusters until they finally got all their certificates and permissions to actually brew.
Yeah. One idea we had was, instead of trying to navigate all that, and I forget the exact details, but we were looking at the legal, all the stuff involved with it. And the biggest obstacle seemed to be having an inspected kitchen, the health inspected kitchen, which, for just your average everyday person who, brews in their kitchen, or, on their propane burner in their backyard or whatever it is, that's a pretty big hurdle to overcome. But what we were thinking about was, could we have a facility that is just just that, an inspected kitchen, and local brewers could come in, do whatever they need to do legally there. They could book, Saturday from 8 to noon. We're gonna, such and such brewery is gonna be there, and then all the people who brew, they could have their, they could be on tap, and there could be like a tap room, and people could come in.
So a couple ideas. One that I've seen work, and again, not to give you ideas, but so if you work with an existing restaurant, they often, with hardly, it used to be a pretty high price hurdle. Now it's nothing to get like a 1-barrel system up. So if you so a lot of times they just want to be able to add a tap that's their own to what they've already got, right? So you've got an already working establishment, everything else going on. They've got the health inspector, everything's all set. And all you're doing is coming in and showing them how to run their 1-barrel system.
Yeah.
There's a danger that once they get your recipes and figure it out, they'll kick you out and take on. But but the flip side of it is that every brewery I've seen recently has violated the concept that you have to be a restaurant first and then a brewery second, because they just pull up a food truck or various other things, and all these guys who are just brewing are winning, right? It's again, I don't understand why this industry doesn't cap out.
I was gonna say that's most of the breweries in Denver area.
Yeah.
Most places are breweries, and then we have secondary food trucks that come in, provide food. Every night of the week, it's a different food. They advertise the food from the food truck, and then it's also pet friendly, right? So if you don't have a kitchen, you can also be pet friendly. So you can have dogs come in, you can have people bring in outside things. So it makes it much more of a community place to gather over drinks versus a community place to eat a meal and get drinks.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned earlier, and like I said, this makes my teaching aspirations even more in jeopardy. My parents, it's really my stepmom owns and runs a local pizza company, and they're all about supporting the local, the local scene, and they have actually where I grew up is on a 66-acre farm, and they grow tomatoes, basil, bell pepper, a bunch of stuff that ends up on pizzas. And so I never broached the idea with my parents, but it did occur to me, that would be the plan, is to, just, if we could get them to be like, yeah, all right, we're closed Monday, you can use the kitchen on Monday. And then, we'd probably have to figure out as far as the fermentation and the storage, where that is going to happen. And then, but there, boom, now we already have our front, to sell it there. And then when it takes off there, we reach out to other, other establishments and kind of grow from there. So I don't know. It's a dangerous, too many things are aligned to make that, make it too easy that I start thinking about it more than maybe I should.
I mean, you can keep teaching for a couple years. Do it as a side hustle.
Yeah.
And you've also got to learn how to make something yellow. So there's no question. You gotta branch out a little bit. So. All right, we've exhausted some people. I'm happy to stay on forever. I've got four half-open beers, so I'm just going to stay on till the last of you takes off. But I won't be hurt if you've decided you've done your alumni piece. I saw from the chat room we're trying to figure out how to pull this off either annually or weekly. I guess those are my choices, either once a year or once a week. So
monthly was an option, Jamie.
Last spring, beer class, as you might have imagined, got interrupted horribly. So we went home for spring break thinking we were coming back and never did. And I just opened up a Friday afternoon chat. We didn't do any formal lectures or anything. There was a way that they completed their necessary requirements for beer class, but we just would have a Friday afternoon informal drinking, which is a little harsh on the West Coasters because it was kind of early out there. But But it was good fun to do this on a weekly basis, with the exception of the fact is there was no topic I could talk about, right? Because this is a bunch of seniors who have no sense of where their future is heading to. They don't have a job, they don't have anything going on. So you couldn't talk about
the world is in turmoil.
Yeah, so you just, you focused on the beer, and it was a good thing to focus on for a week. My daughters, one graduated, one in college, were kind of amazed that I was still holding beer class on every Friday and Zooming in. And attendance was pretty good till the end. So it was, so apparently it isn't a bad thing to do, to focus on the beer.
People like beer. Beer generates community.
They do.
My senior year, I graduated in '83. The German professor, Schultz, had arranged at the VI to have, I forget if it was called Bierstunde or another name for getting together once a week and just having informal conversations about beer, about German. You could only speak in German at the Bierstunde, or there's another name for a gathering like that in German. And it's just a casual get together. That was to speak German, but they're Germans, so beer was involved. And it's just to talk about beer, and the topics are endless. I teach a course. I'm one of 6 professors teaching a certificate course at St. Louis University on beer, and it amazes me how much there is to talk about all the time. It's multifaceted, pretty endless. And with Kenyon's pedigree, at least my pedigree at Kenyon, is that the right term? Time at Kenyon, and yeah, that rugby business and beer and all that, right? So lots of opportunity for good beers.
It really brings people together, and it helps create community, something for people to gather around. So at very least, a gathering place.
Who's the anthropologist?
Great ideas or not so great ideas, but a gathering place.
I forget. Is there not also an anthropology professor who, like, his whole
Dave Suggs?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So
the one anthropology major in our beer lab.
That's right.
Yeah, I
don't think he was invited.
I didn't take a class with him, unfortunately. So
shame on Sean for not being here.
He wasn't
shame
invited.
On him. What is he doing?
He wasn't invited.
How could he not be invited?
I guess living his best life in Cincinnati, but whatever.
I think so.
So Annie, he's back in Nebraska.
So Annie, I want some kickback for the fact that most of my attendees seem to be former beer class graduates. So
well, you certainly have the following. I will say that. So we will invite you to do alumni events anytime that you want to. So, and I will say there has been a suggestion of doing a alumni beer and beer garden sometime in the next year to invite alumni to come back and have beer at the GAM Beer Garden. So I think that's very clever, and that's very Kenyon.
Wait a minute. You mean more than just a trailer parked near,
I mean,
what was the name of that building where I took most of my classes? Ascension. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be at my 40th reunion next week, and I'm the chair of our reunion. And so this was my way of having a beer tent. So thank you.
Good.
Yeah, and we're reunion next year. We will. Jamie, if you're on board, we would love to have you do another beer lab, and we could do it hybrid. We could have some people log in through Zoom and have you do it also in person, and we could figure that out. So I think that's really fun. Also, I don't know if you know Ed Ball, for those in the 80s, who's a really fun alum. He brought up that next year will be 43022 Day. So on April 30th, 2022 is 43022 Day. So there's just all these stars aligning that we can have some really fun stuff in the next year.
So what's the plan as far as, because my 10-year reunion was supposed to be last year. Of course, that didn't happen. And, when at first, I had all these big plans, as everyone did, and then, COVID hit. And so all plans were like, okay, we'll postpone it next year.
Yep.
And then the world wasn't quite ready. So here we are. So is the plan as far as reunion 2022 to be like I mean,
more open. So it's going to be the mega reunion. Now, of course, we have some limitations on space, right? So there's only so many dorms available, but we are going to tier out registration to give the 2s and 7s and the 25th and 50th classes that missed in the O's and the O's, 5s, 1s, and 6s. We'll get first tier registration. Then second tier registration will be everybody else in the O's, 5s, 1s, and 6s that weren't in a milestone year. So you, Junie, would get that second tier round. Susan, you would get that second tier round so that you could register earlier. And then we open it up to everybody else to register. And I'm hoping for things like setting up a little tent place over by the Lowry Center if people want to camp or set up a camper. We've got some off-campus. Junie, I'm assuming that you might be comfortable with camping. I don't know.
I kind of fit that demographic. Yeah, I would be comfortable. In fact, I camped not last night, but the night before I did.
Yeah, so we're gonna, if people are willing to try to come near campus or set up somewhere in a hotel that we, or even the Airbnbs or whatever we can get. We want as many people to come back to the Hill as possible next year.
Well, I will help coordinate that.
Yeah.
The same weekend as my son's twice delayed graduation from college. Colgate has now pushed them back 2 times. So
that's what's happened with Kenyon too. So we will have the class of 22 graduates on the Saturday before reunion. The class of 2020 has their graduation on Sunday, and then reunion is the following weekend. So it'll be nuts this time next year, but I'm looking forward to it. And I think if you can get there and find somewhere to stay, all the better. We want to have you there. So.
Hey, Annie, and I'm going to address this to Jan as well, because I know she was at a couple of the K80s reunions, which were indescribably fun. They were reunion on steroids of sorts. It was very different, great fun. And next year would be for class of 82. Is my math right? 40th? Or is it 50th? Yeah, 40th reunion. And would there be consideration for merging K80s and regular reunions to one weekend? Or
I would love K80s to have a moment during regular reunion. And I think since there'll be so many 80s classes represented, it makes sense that K80s would have a special moment thing during regular reunion.
I would
yeah. So
I mean, everyone knows it's all about us, so we might as well just start making the plans for that. So, right, Jan?
That's right.
So K80s knows how to party. They would enjoy the beer tent a lot.
I think the part-time lovers band is going to be in high demand that weekend. They're amazing. I got to sign off. I got some other stuff to do yet.
Right.
I'm an hour behind many people on this call, so I have that advantage. If you want to do this again, I'm there. Maybe not weekly, maybe every other month, maybe quarterly could be a fun thing. So you guys are great. This is a band of troopers here. So
great to see you, Stephen.
Yep. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Support your local breweries and local food places. Cheers, everybody.
I will give a shout out too to alum class of 2005, Caitlin Landisberg, who has started her own athletic beer.
It's really cool. That's been even here. That's been a big deal. I have some in my fridge because people keep handing it to me. I don't happen to like it, but it's an outstanding idea. So
yeah, so we'd like to have her come back and
we should.
Yeah, and have her talk with you, Jamie, and with Stephen. I think there's a whole lineup.
No, her take on this is really unique. It's really exciting. So
yeah, there's a lot of.
I had told my 2020 graduates, right, the ones who got locked out last year, that they really needed to. Whenever 2021 graduated, they needed to rush the stage and grab those diplomas first because it was theirs first. And none of them took me up on it. It was no disruption of our ceremony this year, but I'm glad to hear that they're allowed to come back next spring. So
yeah, and they chose that time to come back. And so I hope some of them do stick around and enjoy reunion. But 2021 had a fantastic commencement.
They did okay.
I did hear that the the tornado drill interrupted.
Yes.
It was right at noon, because
Yeah.
Commencement is normally on a Saturday, but it was the
when a friend,
month.
yeah, when a friend told me, I was taken back immediately. I was like, oh, yeah, that did happen every Friday, didn't it?
It was not as disruptive as I anticipated it would be, but it was definitely an awkward pause, let the siren go, and then they started again.
So Dana, it wasn't your year, but just a few years earlier, on the department gatherings, a tornado literally came through. And so everybody had to go seek shelter during the middle of it. And I mean, trees fell down. It was really, it was exciting. So that was the precursor to their commencement. It wasn't
exciting. Yeah. For sure, the word to use.
Everybody, thank you, Professor Hale. Thank you, Stephen. So thank you for putting this
so good to see you.
Yeah. It was good to see so many familiar faces.
All right. Welcome back next year.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Such a good event.
Bye, guys.
Monthly.
Yeah.
Monthly, there you go. So Heath, what are you doing these days?
Oh, me? Oh, goodness. I am, I'm a paralegal in New York.
All right.
I'm working in the music industry.
And you're in New York. You didn't like leave it like everybody else who I know in New York left.
No, I moved to it.
All right.
I'm from here originally.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was mid-pandemic. I decided to pack up my things and move to the big city.
All right.
And you know, the rents were way cheaper, so it
yes,
kind of
they were.
We'll see when we have to renew the lease if that's going to be super feasible.
But you were in Seattle before then, or you just happened to know your Seattle geography?
I was in Providence.
Oh, okay.
I was in Rhode Island before then.
Yeah, but you know your Seattle geography pretty well. I heard you spewing out some where breweries are. So
I know bits and bobs about every city around.
I know things. I
know things. I do know things. Actually, I had a Chattanooga. My brother lived there for a little bit, and in the train station there, there's like a tiny like whiskey and gin.
Oh yeah, there is. Yeah.
And
what is I forget the name of it, but they do like music things there, and that's how I discovered it, is because my friend was like, oh, let's go play this thing here, and it's really, all right, cool.
Yeah. I think I was down there like the year after I graduated, and like I was with my parents, and they were just like, why don't you just go ask if we can get a tour of their setup? And I was like, no, like, let's not bother them. And my mom just walked up, was like, my son's into brewing. Can we see?
I forget. There's something. I forget what the exact details are. Something like they don't do. I don't know. They do some of it off-site, and then
it's like the vodka and the gin was on-site, and then the whiskey was off-site.
And then there's another. So I was thinking about this earlier when we were talking about the legal side of things, and this is within the last 5 or 10 years. You know, this is it's not as new news now, but so there's, I mentioned Chattanooga Brewing Company. There's also a Chattanooga Whiskey Company, which for a while did their, all of their operations were like, a couple hours away because they could not get the permits. The city would not, the way the laws were written, they could not do they couldn't do the whole process. They couldn't distill in the city limits or something. I don't forget the exact details, but what's cool is that they petitioned, and they got this taken care of and that taken care of, and they actually do it now in, I forget where their setup is, but they're in the city now, and it is actually Chattanooga Whiskey Company in actuality and not just in name. They were called Chattanooga Whiskey Company even if they were distilling in, I forget where it was. It was like I said, an hour or two away. But that's cool, and it like I said, I've been really impressed for the size of the city. There's there's a lot of breweries here that
there's like one right next to the soccer stadium.
Well, there's two actually. There's Naked Frog and Chattanooga Brewing Company is like at.
I think that's the one I've been to, because my brother was part of like a running club that on like Wednesdays they would like run a mile and then drink and then run another mile and drink.
Yeah, if you're sitting on the patio where I first sampled the Chattanooga Brewing Company Habanero Ale, and you look to your right, you can see there's the field goal, and then the rest of the field. So there's I guess it's where UTC, University of Tennessee in Chattanooga, that's where they play their games. But there's also Chattanooga Football Club, football in the European sense, soccer.
Yeah, they just started that like 2 years ago or 1 year ago.
Yeah, and they play there, and Chattanooga Brewing Company is like the official or unofficial, I don't know, but that's like the where the
drinks.
yeah, exactly, and that's like the big place to go and watch the soccer games is at CBC, because it's literally right there. But yeah, Naked Frog, which is another, and they do a lot of that. We were talking about the kind of like funky fruit beers. They had like a mandarin ale, and that one was pretty good. It was, it had that orange flavor. The thing that gets me with a lot of the fruity ones is that sometimes they're too sweet, and it's just, I don't know.
You got to be careful about fruit around.
Hey, I'm almost through my ch-erry infused concoction here, so I'm mellowing in my older age.
Okay, I remember I think I like brought some beer that was like
a shandy or something.
Yeah. I know forever I've been wrong.
It was left.
Exactly.
So we all said, "What happened to that beer?" I said, "It just doesn't count."
It doesn't. Yeah, you got to bring it. Yeah, you got to do.
It's not a beer.
It used to be the one way to fail beer class was to bring a fruit beer.
Yeah.
So it's only because Trevor kind of had an in that kept him alive. So.
I was wondering
he
earlier.
He brings you that spotted cow and he gets a free pass.
That's right. I knew I wasn't going to my spotted cow if I failed him in beer class.
What's funny though is that folks in Wisconsin take it for granted that it's like it's just all abundant, right? And like
yeah.
So I hadn't seen family in like over a year, and I went home in April for the first time, and they had spotted cow in the fridge, and I was just like, oh my god, like I just this is warming my heart.
So I don't.
My dad's like, are you sure you want that? We have like other stuff. I'm like, yes.
Only this, please.
This is all I want. Like,
So I don't want to brag, but I must have mentioned something in class. That's all I can figure, because this spring, knowing I'm not going to get spotted cow except for my daughter, who did come through, I ended up getting 10 different cans of Heady Topper from 2 different families who came across. So this is a Vermont IPA.
Okay.
That's astoundingly good. And it doesn't need to distribute anywhere past Vermont, because everybody comes to them and buys everything they can possibly brew. And it is an outstanding beer. And in my little gift packs, that's what you guys missed. I didn't get a gift pack from you. So, I got both 2 8-packs, missing one, and another 2-pack of Heady Toppers. So they understood.
Yeah, that's incredible. When I went to my last year at Kenyon, I went to nationals in Texas.
That's right.
And my parents flew down.
Yes, they did. I remember that.
And I like had to like lay them in my suitcase in checked bag, like wrapped the bottles individually, in like my like clothes to make sure that they get back to Kenyon intact, and just like praying that it doesn't like shatter in the.
No.
Or TSA doesn't pull you over.
Was this your year?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think it was.
Yeah.
I love this thing. Yeah.
Oh,
No. There's a special Kenyon Beer Lab class.
Yeah, Corey put
So
those together.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
With like the wheat, like crosses or whatever. Yeah. This is not that. I shattered mine. So
I have an extra for a price you might be able to have, but
I don't know if I can hold out for that much. But I know the guy that made them, so maybe
I know the guy that made them.
Maybe he'll give me the specs on that.
All right.
That's a good one.
On that topic, I've got a friend gave me this one, but I'm actually, as a chemically literate person, I'm ashamed that I don't know what all these what all we've got here. We've definitely got an ethanol molecule and some sugars and stuff.
I like that.
But yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. It's got, I don't know, the glare is kind of working against me here, but you can at least
I
tell
can
it's
see
got
most
some-
of it. I can see most of it.
I,
So there's
there's a water.
the-
There's for sure water. I can see a water, and that's about all I can recognize now. That's even.
ethanol was somewhere on here. Yeah.
So in what I still call the new science building, right? They decided, each segment of the quad, whether it was physics, math, chemistry, etc., got its own furniture styles and various other things. And we have on the nameplate is actually a molecule, and it's caffeine. I have no idea who in the architect's office decided this is what we need to highlight for chemistry is caffeine.
Between caffeine and ethanol, I we were talking about spicy food earlier. I had been toying with the idea of either getting or making T-shirts that had a capsaicin molecule on them, which is the spicy, that molecule, because it's got a interesting looking structure, at least more so than ethanol, maybe.
It is.
Well, I won't get too into it, but I did lose a bet once, and I do have an ethanol tattoo on my body. I won't reveal myself to you. But yeah, it's on me, above the hip. So
it's on me.
Above the hip. That's good.
I won't take my shirt off on the Zoom. It's being recorded.
It is being recorded. I don't think they knew what they were doing when they decided to record this. So.
That's good.
For alumni purposes, perhaps.
Yeah.
So,
but anyway, my other tonight, I don't know if we talked about this, but
oh, cool.
I am a malt liquor fan, as you know, so I went with the Natty Daddy.
We had now this I know wasn't your year. We had very recently we had a couple of interest talks on malt liquor, including a tasting of various malt liquors, so we could compare. And I don't know. I mean, after the first one, it was hard to compare anything. But
yeah, the percentages will sneak up on you, and they'll sneak up on you mightily.
I was always more of a King Cobra kind of guy.
Oh, yeah.
We tried that one too.
Colt 45s, yeah.
Colt 45, yep. So it was, there's the
So I'm seeing a difference here between the guys who are drinking Rainier because they're too nervous about what they have to do to those who are slugging down a malt liquor. I like that. So.
That's, yeah. Oh, trust me, I will make fun of Corey accordingly.
You should.
Yeah, well, his semester's ending. I guess that makes sense.
Not too bad.
I can always shoot back that some of us have work tomorrow. But
yeah, I got to show up and deal with a bunch of high schoolers tomorrow. So
only a few more days.
Yeah, and we're it's the silliest thing. So they've already done all their state testing. Yeah. My grades are more or less final. If they're still doing work, then I'll raise their grade, but I'm not assigning anything new.
Yeah.
So today what we did is scraped hot glue off the desks and cleaned out the drawers, and then we ended up playing Uno for probably at least half an hour in each class, which is that was one of the things that I remember when I was like, well, what do I kind of realized I'd like to do something related to science and education. I thought, in high school you do have, I get maybe Kenyon might be a bit of a break the mold, in that the professors do get to interact with the students on the more human level. But like I took a lot of classes at OSU as well. I took a biology class that was like 650 students. And one professor, and it's just like I am literally a number to this person, and so I thought when you're in high school you do get to have a little bit more personal level interaction with the kids. So yeah, we played Uno, and then I teach at a kind of like an inner city school, and they were having a rap battle. As things kind of devolved into me not having any control, but they invited me to partake in that, and I was I did my best, and they were impressed at me. So I was like, all right, that counts for something, right? And I actually, so I mentioned I was a music major as well, and they were, they had one kid beatboxing who was just getting out of breath because he kept having to, I was like, I got you. So I set up a little loop on my computer to play the. So that was my cultural involvement in it.
See, I think physics and music do go together, no matter what.
Oh, they absolutely do. Yeah. And even beyond the, the sort of explicit, waves and physics and frequency and wavelength and tension and amplitude and all that kind of stuff. The way that we, in my music classes, a lot of it would be, okay, here is this score from a piece of music. And you've got to figure out, what's going on, what chord is this, what's the relationship of this chord to that chord, and all that kind of very analytical thinking and identifying how the different parts work together, and the clarinet's doing this and the violins are doing that, and it's not like a one-to-one kind of thing, but it's the same, very similar kinds of things to what you're doing in physics. Well, we got this is applying a force here, and then there's inertia and torque and blah, blah, whatever, and how all the parts work together and how this is affecting that and how the two kind of come together. And so even beyond the sort of explicit physics of music stuff, there's a lot of the same kind of how you think about things that happens in those.
Yeah, well, I mentioned I'm at a law firm now, and that was a fun interview technique of trying to blend. All I've ever done is science and healthcare, and how do I just flip that to being something that's completely not related to any of that? And I was just like, oh, science, you prove shit, law, you prove shit. It's the same shit. And
yeah.
Here I am.
I deal a lot with every teacher's favorite question of, why do I need to know this? And you don't need to know this. You could go your whole life without understanding, without applying Newton's laws of motion to what's going on around you. But if you develop the ability to take a situation and pick it apart, and what's, why is this happening, and what's the cause and effect here, and that is a very useful skill, regardless of if it's physics or chemistry or law, or just this relationship between these two people, whatever the the context is. That sort of analytical mindset is a very valuable thing, I think.
Yeah. So he's my mother-in-law is turning 85 this summer, and she still sends me articles telling me how it's not too late for me to go into law or medicine or anything else that's more lucrative than academics. So
Jamie, I am such a disappointment. Yeah, so Judy, everyone else here knows Judy. I'm the second of three children who went to Kenyon. My older brother is a medical doctor, and my sister is
a miracle worker. Yeah. I don't know what she does. She walks on water, so
she's incredible.
And then there's Trevor.
And then there's Trevor.
I think he knows how to swim. That's all I heard. That's about it.
I'm a bit of a black sheep, but the funny thing is that I'm not. I'm a PhD student. Today I passed my qualifying exam.
Hey,
that's
what
for me.
What realm is your PhD in?
Yeah, I'm studying applied math and computer science in biology. So I've moved a little bit away from chemistry, but
a complete failure.
Exactly. Everyone in my sphere pities me, but it's an interesting realm.
That's right. They'll send you money for the rest of your life. You'll be all right. So
I'm just oh, please take care of me. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, no, that's Corey, who was on earlier, and Eric, who was on earlier. They're in medical school and PhD programs, and I'm the one that has a 9-to-5 normal person job, and they're like, you are the envy of us. Like, you figured out academia, maybe not it.
I do, you know, I'm proud of my career choices.
Oh.
I do have, you know, there's that, like, oh, like that guy, like, oh, he was in my, you know, whatever class. Like, so I don't know if you guys know the band, what are they even, I forget their name, Walk the Moon, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And so Nick Patrica.
When I play Walk the Moon is the one time that my music choices blend and actually match my students of this.
Yeah.
This time, so.
You know, and so I'll be like, oh yeah, Nick Patrica, like we were in the same, you know, structure and analysis class at Kenyon, you know, or you know, there's other ones too. You know, I guess there's the more sort of, I didn't take any classes with Paul Newman, obviously, but like, oh, Paul Newman, he went to Kenyon. That's where I went to, you know, and these like, you know, I'll list off, I have the, you know, notable Kenyon alumni list memorized, and I, you know, rattle it off whenever needed.
The John Greens, yeah.
Junie, why are you not on that list? You know,
sorry.
What's
what were
that?
you saying, Trevor?
I was on a run recently. I was wearing a Kenyon shirt, like, and I was stopped by a group of 4 women who had gone to Kenyon. And it's been so long since I had the conversation of like,
yeah,
well, I went to, because you know, you kind of like have that experience of like, because of COVID, I just like haven't had that in so long.
Strangers.
So I like asked all the, the conversation was so awkward. I didn't ask any of the right questions. Like, I didn't remember like any of the motions. And I knew as soon as it ended, I was like,
you probably forgot the handshake by now too.
Yeah. It was like as soon as it ended, I was like, I'm gonna think about this for a week about how weird I was in this interaction.
It's such a rare experience though, especially where I live. There's not many people who have heard of Kenyon, much less went there. But every now and then someone will be like, oh, you went to Kenyon, you know, and you know, I guess I'm not really bragging to anyone since we all have our connections to Kenyon, right? But they're like, oh, that's a really good school. And I'm like, thank you. Most people think it's like, you know, like a little 2-year community college, which
not near Uganda.
That has its time and place. But Kenyon is like more.
I found that like a lot of what's cool is like a lot of the other small liberal arts colleges are aware of one another. So there's this like, and they've had like extremely similar experiences to your Kenyon experience.
Yeah.
So there's this like
almost similar experiences. Let's be serious here, right?
Yes. Yeah. You're like, we've done similar things, but I don't know if you had beer lab your last year.
I also think like people's parents might know more about it than they do, because they're like,
sometimes
when we were looking for schools for our kids, that might have been on the list if they were looking for a good liberal arts.
My family's so funny though, where it's like my brother, like out of the blue.
I don't know what happened to your family. Was there any other option for you?
I don't know. I mean,
I know there wasn't for Sarah. I mean, you're like that was it. It's like,
yeah, I think
this
she
is
visited
where
on her
you're
swimming
going.
trip. Was like,
it was just
I'm coming here.
Like I had kind of looked at other schools to swim at, and I'd actually committed to go swim at Duke, and I kind of like pulled out last minute to go to Kenyon.
It turns out Trevor actually really does know how to swim. So. I think he actually swims better than his siblings.
It's a trait I've lost. But
one of my coworkers, her son actually goes to I guess he went to the same high school that I went to, so that was like connection number one. But then he's pretty serious into swimming, and so I don't think he looked at Kenyon, but they at least knew what Kenyon was through the swimming world. And I think actually one of his classmates is going to Kenyon, or is that maybe it was I don't even know what was there a freshman class this year? What was that like?
There was
all virtual or
no, we let it was kind of crazy. You don't want to get into the weeds. We let the frosh and the sophomores come in the fall. We kicked off the juniors and seniors. It was sad. And then the idea was a switch, but then we let the sophomores come back. So the frosh got kicked off in the spring.
Yeah. So sophomores had a full year, and then juniors and seniors.
Sophomores had sophomores had a full year. The notion was somehow sophomores got the short end of the stick throughout all this from last spring. I mean, everybody got worried about the seniors from last spring, and I have a daughter who she's not at Kenyon, but she happens to be now a senior in college. So it meant her junior year was disrupted, and we knew her whole senior year was going to be disrupted. So they were the ones who really took it.
Yeah.
And the sophomores didn't do much better. So I think when they decided finally we could add another class, there was a rich discussion of whether it was going to be the first years that got to come back or the sophomores who had already been kicked off once. And so I think they decided to let the frosh go flounder. So, I mean, it worked out. I mean, in hindsight, it's hard to know. It was the right density argument. We had our own challenges this spring trying to keep things under control.
Well, I saw your guys like portal for like COVID reporting, and that looked really.
Drew Kirchhoff was a big part of that.
Yeah,
it was mostly good.
His Twitter was popping off that.
Yeah, some of you guys know it was kind of crazy, right? So John Slanzewski was a major push behind the wastewater testing. So that was kind of a novel thought, and it picked up quite a bit on other areas across the country. But and it very specifically, so we had a general wastewater treatment test last spring, and by this fall it was getting very specific. Like we could tell you which corner of campus was having troubles. Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of cool. I mean, it was the real canary in the coal mine idea. I mean, I think Kenyon handled this as well as we ever could. Oberlin was more conservative, so they kept their density down by opening another semester, which they're regretting now because they're now having a summer semester that nobody wanted to have, and both faculty and students who didn't want to be there this summer are having to come back. Other places,
they're less rural, so maybe that was
that's right. Other places did this thing where they started early, like Notre Dame and other folks, so they could finish by Thanksgiving, and it didn't work out well. So I mean, in the end, we chose very well. We got through it all, yeah, it's kind of crazy.
So fall 2021, back to normal?
All good. Actually, better than normal. I mean, this was so financially, the whole question was how much of a class could we bring back, right? And it's too big a class, so we're looking for beds. For the first time ever, we're offering Frosh this notion of going to Copenhagen and all these things where you kind of start your career elsewhere. So we're going to send 2 random faculty members to Copenhagen so they can, I don't know, stand over a bunch of freshmen.
Yeah, a whole 20 18-year-olds.
Exactly. Because it's just like, however many beds we need, we need 80 beds. 80 of you are going to Copenhagen. So
I was gonna say, just build new apps.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, we got the money. We're building new things. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So the newest plan, some of you are paying attention and some are learning. So Kenyon's 3rd century, right? Our new 2020 strategic plan involves some growth, and it makes sense. It's the only way financially to make this work, to kind of keep expanding the academic opportunities and kind of work things out as they get a little bigger. And they're not talking about a lot bigger, but it comes down to kind of thinking about how this campus, how this little hill can handle another dorm, and maybe, I don't know what they're going to do for dining. I think they can almost squeeze them in, but how to handle another 2. That's right.
What are you expecting in terms of in student increase?
So they're talking in 10 years, they want to add either 200 or 250 students. So they're adding 10 students a year, which is nothing. But ultimately, it's a crunch, right? Ultimately, it says, can a 24-seat classroom work for anything?
Yeah.
Because they have to be like 30 to 40-seat classrooms. So there's some interesting choices. It makes perfect sense from the way to run things. It'll be kind of, when it gets down into the weeds, it'll be interesting to see how things work out. it should bring just enough revenue and just enough new positions in to kind of, augment the faculty, give new opportunities. There'll be a computer science degree. There'll be all sorts of things. So it'll all be good.
Will there be enough lab space?
We think so. So that's a good question. And we're fighting that right now.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of the right way to go. It's different for us, right?
Yeah.
It's we've talked about this for 30 years. How we should be a little bigger than we are right now.
Because part of the sell is the small classes.
Exactly, and but it's hard to, it scales so much better if you just go just a little richer. Just Oberlin's much bigger. Something like Allegheny somewhere in between the two of us, but your Williamses, your Amherst are all a little bit bigger. So it just helps to go a little.
What's the student body total?
Well,
right
we used to say we were 1680, but we've lied for years. We're about 1740 right now.
Yeah.
And you're going to add 200, so we're going to be pushing 2,000.
Yeah, I think it was 1650 is the number I remember when I was there.
That was a light year. 1680 was always the target that we always beat. We used to have something called a September list, so when we beat the target, there would be money available.
So I didn't know that September. It was that specific.
Like, the models are right down to the kid, right down to the student.
Like when it's that small, like the variability, right? You have to be super predictive. But as a student, I'm just there.
I guess it is kind of weird to think about. You have X number of students apply.
Yeah.
And you offer
it's an incredible piece of
like a full
people accepted.
Yeah.
So there was a time that the admissions got into real hot water, and it's because you get consultants, you pay people to figure this out, right? To figure out the yield. The yield is a big deal. What's going to come, and the problem was they'd only used a 5-year model on the yield, and we'd had a really high set of 5 years, and we got a low class. What happened was we got a low class. A low class is a disaster, right? Because you go to your wait list, you do various other things, but basically you can't fund what you want to do.
And then that's the next 4 years is low.
Exactly, and then it's like set up for 4 years, right? So we were looking back to see who we could blame for this, and it came down to the fact that they were using this like 5-year average, and they needed to use a longer average. It was all these crazy things that go on. But it's it's healthy right now. It's I think a little bigger class will do two things. It'll bring in a little more flexibility from financial aid, because we still, knock on wood, are able to get enough full pay kids in here to give us the breathing room to actually offer some really good packages. And if we can fit them into rooms and we can get them into classes, then it'll all work out. So, but yeah, they were very anxious about this coming year. There was a lot of talk, I don't know if you were listening, about, as a pandemic hit and various other things, about whether this is worth it, right? whether you're going to go to small schools or not. And there was some schools did not survive. Some schools are really gonna kind of fade away because they did not come out of this well. They didn't handle the pandemic well enough because they didn't have reserves, and they're not going to get people coming.
Yeah, and then like even larger schools, they're like cutting sports that are
larger schools are doing wild things. Yeah, it's kind of crazy what they're cutting.
My favorite story so far is that next year, Michigan State is going to be sponsored by Quicken Loans. So if you watch like Michigan State football or Michigan State basketball, it's going to be
cool.
Like the Michigan State Spartans by Quicken Loans.
I love Michigan State. They have a tough sell to beat out UM.
Yeah. Well, you're going to see some more corporate sponsorship at the
we have a few
level.
Michigan State alumni in the chemistry department, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do.
By Quicken Loans.
So I went took kayaks out a couple nights ago on the Kokosi. Nice day, nice night. And we were chatting away with our hosts at the end, and somehow they're connected to a provost, and I'm going to forget what school, which is good. And they said, smallish school, not too big, much bigger than Kenyon. And they were talking about the travails of the last year for this provost, and they had to cut. And they said, what'd they cut? They said, they cut art history. And I said, big loss.
I don't know if that would fly.
It wasn't like they cut physics or anything like that. They cut art history. So
it's interesting in the UW. Hey, the UW.
Hi, Susan.
Of like the Wisconsin schools, like a lot of the degree programs for like the UW system have become so specialized that they are cutting like English or like like those types of degrees in favor of things like I don't know, like hotel management or something like that. Something that's more like career oriented. So I think it's like it's really challenging, and like there's this, you know, in parts of the Midwest, especially Wisconsin, where it's like the programs that are getting, like at Kenyon, we sort of have these like umbrella programs that aren't necessarily like you will get a job in this afterwards, and so.
But it's like maybe in 10 years you will be at this grand position.
No, it's interesting being in the you know, the kind of advisorial position where, you know, kids are like, okay, Mr. Schuber, what should I major in? And I'm like, I majored in music. So like, I will brag on myself a little bit here. For probably 7 or 8 years, I supported myself pretty well as a private music instructor. So it's possible.
Hey, you know, it's
totally possible. I got tired of the hours because, you know, the hours, it was like 3 to 10 p.m. because that's when people are not at school or at work or whatever. And so that, and I enjoyed the aspect. I mean, I actually really enjoyed it. It's just that I didn't like the benefits package or the hours. So I went into public education, which is, you know, so much more, right? But anyway, yeah, it is, you know, even the aspect of, you know, it's kind of a debate almost politically of like, is college for everyone, and you know, and having gone somewhere like Kenyon, which, you know, I don't need to tell anyone is, you know, not the most frugal option, but you know, I tell people, you know, I have zero regrets from what I did. You know, there's a lot of sacrifice on my part and my family's part to make that happen. It was the right choice for me. Maybe a similar choice is good for you. Maybe not. Maybe you want to do like a welder apprentice program and you'll make more money than I'm going to make. You know, anytime soon.
I mean, to be fair, we are all here at 11 p.m. on.
Well, and so
we are biased in terms of our feelings.
We are.
That was kind of my point. Is that, you know, like, for the right person, there is no other option. You know, for certain people, if you are that type of person, you really will thrive from, you know, and you know, here I'm 10 years, I don't know, I guess 2017, I don't know what the rest of you guys are, you know, I'm 10 years out, or I guess 11 years now. And I've been looking forward to this, you know, this call. I'm like, oh, like chance to reconnect with my like Kenyon, you know, people that I don't even know. There's Jill Pattison was the only other person in the call that I knew. So I overlapped with her for, I guess, 2 years. But yeah, it is, you know, it's very much the experience of it. And, you know, comparing, so I did 4 years at Kenyon and I had 3 years at OSU doing, getting my master's degree, some other stuff, and then my master's degree in education. And it's just like totally incomparable experience. You know, Kenyon, I knew all my professors. You know, my classes, you know, biggest class I ever had was like 25 people. And just, it was, you know, I was part of the community. And at OSU, I mean, it was like, it's, you know, those are almost two polar opposites almost, in that, you know, OSU, I think last I checked was like 60,000 undergrad students, which is just mind blowing. You know, that is an enormous amount of people. And the class sizes, you know, I had classes that were in the hundreds, and even the small classes I had were bigger than just like a Kenyon standard. 30 students was like a pretty small class by OSU standards. And that was like a third year, evolution seminar or something, which is like, not a very popular class. And so like you were saying, Trevor, it's for the right people. It's kind of like, this is what you need to do, because you will get the most out of it. Not everybody's going to get the same thing out of it, but if it's the right match for you, then you got to do what you got to do.
I think I feel like I'm so fortunate to have gone, because it was really right for me. I tongue in cheek earlier about sort of my family not being thrilled about maybe what I'm doing. But the reality is that, like, because of the professors I had at Kenyon, like, my mind going into school was like, I want to go into medicine like my parents. And I had John Hofferberth was like my advisor, and he was just at one point like, you could just like do research, like you could be a PhD if you wanted to. I was like, what? Like, I had never even thought of that before. And so now, that's kind of like, I'm not doing organic synthesis now. Fortunately, I think I can, I can do most of my work on my laptop, which is really nice. But it was sort of like that type of. Kenyon was a really gradual thing for me, going from a smaller area in Wisconsin to like kind of getting thrown into like academia a little bit, and now I'm like a little bit further in that world too. So for me, it was like really the perfect kind of timing to be at a place. But like I said, that's why I'm here. Like, we're all biased for being here at 11 p.m. on a Monday night and hanging on for longer. So nobody else would show up if they didn't feel this kinship that we do. So
like Dr. Keller, close your ears, but I don't think chemistry or biology are my passion, even though that's what I studied and did for 4 years. But like, the end of that was kind of like, oh shit, I don't want to do this, but I'm here now. And I really love the people that I've met here, and they're going to carry me through somehow.
Well, it's like I was saying earlier, it's at a certain point, it's no longer about the content that you're learning. It's about, and this is what I told my kids too, is like, a lot of times when you're applying for a job, they don't care what that degree was in. They don't care what your major was. No, they don't. They care that you had the commitment and the willpower to push yourself through these 4 years of, great times, but also like, depending on where you go to school, like I worked my butt off at Kenyon. It was not a walk in the park by any means. And that's what you're sort of showing that when you put your mind to it, you can, get shit done, pardon the French, but
No, also I was a molecular biology major, and nobody knows what molecular means at all. Like, I'm convinced if you put it on a resume, people think that you're a fucking genius.
Oh yeah.
Pardon my French.
I don't. But
no, Heath, it's true. I just tell people I was a neuroscience major, and they're like, oh. And I'm like, oh no, it just means I studied systems, and I have no idea what I'm talking about.
I'm like, I did small biology, and they're like,
it's the same. I'm a physics teacher, and people are like, oh.
Right.
It's like, I mean, I try, right?
No, what Kenyon doesn't teach you is that if you like mention a science word, most people just crumble and be like, oh,
there you go. That's true. There you
I
go.
default to you.
Oh, you're a science person. Let's go to you. Let's go to you.
Right. So thanks for that, I guess.
So Heath and Trevor, sounds like y'all were there at the same time. Susan, were you also the same?
I'm actually Dana, but I'm using my.
I was going to say that doesn't look like Susan.
I know. Sorry.
Class of '81. Class of '81. Right?
You look so good.
Well,
What's your skincare routine? Yeah.
I watch it occasionally.
Yeah. So Dana and I are class of 2018 classmates. Trevor's class of 2017.
Trevor was my biology 1 TA, AT, whatever.
We call it something different.
Kenyon, yeah. Like, so I was by Kenyon terminology, I was a CA, community advisor, but so let me translate that to everyone else.
I lived with our CA.
Yeah, it is funny how you kind of have to
year.
you learn the lingo outside of Kenyon for like what different things were. When people talk about like we at Kenyon, everyone's like, oh, I'm working on my comps or something, and then outside of Kenyon, people are like, oh, I worked on a thesis, and you're like, yeah, I worked on my thesis.
Exactly.
When you go home for the summer, it's a new terminology.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, that's what I did. We have a different
Everything
word
is
for
just
it.
slightly tweaked.
Yeah, and you kind of have to make. You're like, am I with Kenyon people or am I with like the other people?
Everyone else.
It's like I went to a liberal arts school. You wouldn't get it.
It's not Orgo.
Yeah, you're like.
It's
funny.
OChem.
It's my only
OChem,
exposure
not
as
Orgo.
who I am. Yeah. Oh, OChem or
that's
Orgo. That's really a good distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like Orgo, and people are like, huh?
Yeah. Oh, is
I'm
OChem?
like, OChem?
Yeah.
Also,
And
when I tell
everyone's like,
people
oh,
that's my favorite class I ever took, I get like wild looks.
It was a good class. I did not do well, but it was a good class.
Well, my Orgo / OChem experience was I took it over the summer at OSU at the same time as microbiology and molecular genetics, and it was a rough.
That sounds like a shitty summer.
Yeah, so like those 3 classes crammed into a
2 months.
Yeah, 2 months. Ooh, it was. I mean, I passed them all. I think I did decently well, but only because they're probably like, well, this is the
if nothing makes you hate science
more,
it'll be that.
What's that?
If nothing makes you hate science more, it'll be that.
Get like a bad rap, and it's mostly because there's such like anyone who's taken them talks about it when they're taking them all the times, but it's mostly because it's like anything that you've learned in chemistry before that point doesn't necessarily apply, and so it's like a whole new kind of rule set. But I like TA'd Organic Chem 1 at Kenyon a couple semesters, and it was always like, to me, looking at the students who took it, like after you kind of learn the rules about thinking about like molecular structures in that way, like as a TA, I didn't have to like prep almost anything at all. Like it was just like the concepts themselves were just so new that was the hard part, was like kind of teaching the new rules about how to think about the chemistry. But like,
I think it's like I'm much more like a visual person, not like so mathematical. So chemistry, like intro chem, I struggled like because it was more mathematical, and then like Orgo was like you don't have to do any math.
It's very spatial.
It's just move these arrows around and you'll be fine.
I liked it because it was like, it kind of like, you got like a book of rules for like how to push electrons and stuff like that. And so like, I remember like a lot, like early sort of approaches to it would be people are like always trying to memorize mechanisms. And like the thing that you need to memorize are just sort of like the little steps. Because if you know the steps, you can always kind of like trace it out. And like, once you had that, the prep was like out, you didn't have to like prepare as much because it was just sort of like the little steps themselves.
It became intuitive if you did it enough.
Yeah, because you just sort of learned the steps and then you learned like the little exceptions. But it's funny because like learning that new way of thinking about chemistry was so foreign, because like anything that I'd learned in like high school was like so different. And so I think like a lot of people get met with it and they're all like, everyone's just like, oh, I'm taking Orgo, it's the worst in the world. Like,
it's like I can't flashcard my way through this. What the fuck?
Everyone immediately is like, oh, this is the hardest thing ever. And the reality is just like, oh, it's just like you haven't thought about like chemistry in this way before.
Well, it's a different muscle in your brain.
I don't know. I'm so curious as to how professors think about trying to teach this for the first time, because for me, like, as a bystander, I just sort of watch it happen.
See, I only TA'd labs, and that was great because I just learned from Getzler to just tell them to figure out themselves and walk away. like students would be like, oh, is that supposed to be this color? And I'd be like, does it say it in the book? And they're like, no. And I'm like, so probably not. And then walk away.
You were my favorite / least favorite TA.
I played good music. That was about it.
I play good music.
Yeah, I can count on you for good music.
But yeah, no, because I don't know. I feel like lab was, you recorded what you did and then that was what you were graded on rather than what you actually did. So I was like, don't worry about it. Like if you screwed up, just say that and you're going to get a fine grade.
Lab's another thing though, like that was never something I had in like high school, like thinking about like, so it's so funny to think back about the first time you get a sheet that says like pour out 100 milliliters of something and you're like with the, like,
right.
You're measuring out your solvent to like the perfect line and you're like, oh, I did too much. And it's like, it's the solvent, like don't
right.
But
I screwed up the whole lab. I have to start over.
Right, you don't know how to like. You don't have the intuition for like what how much.
Yeah, to like screw it.
Like,
Let me just say, as a high school chemistry teacher, like being at least a little. Sometimes I'll be like, okay, so you just need to fill it up to the 50 milliliter line. Like, is this good? And it's like, it's literally overflowing out of a 250 milliliter thing. that's
so the place where it says 50.
Like, yeah.
Or, like, what even is a milliliter? Like, what is that like? Is that a distance? I don't know. Nobody knows this stuff in high school.
That's a good point. I think
like, how many kilograms is that? I don't know, like 3 inches maybe? Nope, those are two totally different.
Those are different units.
I've been taking a remote physics lab this past semester for prereqs for PT school, and they just walk you through everything. It's really nice. They just tell you what to do, and I'm like, I can do this. I just have to record what I'm doing. Fantastic. Easy. Kenyon prepared me well for this because I over prepared for this lab according to the grading standards.
I think I just like it when it's like when you're met with something new for the first time, everything is equally important. And then if you become acquainted with it, you can kind of be like, oh, this thing I don't need to worry as much about. Like, this is the important step, right? But because the first time you're reading like the ingredients list, you're like, I need to like take out my smallest Erlenmeyer flask and make sure the minute is like at 100 milliliters, because that's what I read in like the tutorial for like how to do this.
So what also was funny about the section that I TA'd was that it was the like accelerated freshman intro ones. It was like the year that they swapped Orgo, that you like Orgo 1 was in the spring.
Yeah.
And so it was like this, it was like the like Friday afternoon lab. So like the one that no one applied for except the freshmen that like were the only ones that could get into it because they took the advanced. And so they were the most like narrowed in, like, I'm here to get my med degree. Like, let me be like as serious as I can about my grades. And I could just be like, that doesn't matter. And they'd be like, why? And I'd be like, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter.
You're probably a really good TA for those individuals.
He was.
I think
that's why he was chosen for that.
You know, I was one of those individuals when I came into Kenyon. And then I had Nikki Leonard was one of my TA. And Keller is smiling right now because he knows who Nikki is. He was one of my TAs. And it was one of these experiences of like, you're just turning to this person because you're like, you're the only one who can help me. And they're just kind of like, yeah, figure it out. And like, you kind of like learn, like they're this mystical person who just knows everything. And you're like, but they're so calm about it. Like, what's up with that? So, yeah, I don't know. It's funny how individual people can really just sort of like drive your attitude around like so many things. Anyway.
Yeah, I think the point was like, don't worry about your grade. Like, that's all you're worrying about. Like, don't worry about just that.
Yeah. All right, everyone. It's been truly a pleasure. And I hope to do it again. And great to meet you, Junie.
Nice to meet you. I didn't know you guys coming in. I sort of knew of Dr. Keller, but it's really been a pleasure. And I think back to the first time I came back to Kenyon. Actually, it was to go visit Jill Pattison, who was here earlier. And it was kind of a weird experience because I hadn't been there in a few years. I was like, oh, these are not my people here anymore. But the great thing about Kenyon, we were kind of talking about it earlier, is there's some sort of like shared experience where like you were mentioning, Trevor, like there have been times where I was wearing a Kenyon shirt and somebody like, did you go to Kenyon? And then that's like the beginning of our conversation. But it is great, the sort of shared, actually, I was at a conference one time for education, and there was somebody else who had gone to Kenyon, and we were like instantly best buddies, and it's kind of there is some sort of shared experience. And having never met any of you, I've enjoyed chatting with you for the last 3 hours.
It's been now. Really oh my God.
We just need to come to Kenyon during our same years.
That's right. I mean, that's part of it. I think it's amazing to come to reunions in the flesh or this way and see people you didn't interact with when you were there and know that they're kind of still your people. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So
there's this crazy thing about just like, even like now meeting new people, if I can meet someone who went to Kenyon, like that I didn't even know, it's so much easier. Like, it's just great. Like, I'd love to chat with you about your experience there. And we share this sort of like implicit background that is so special to me personally.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same.
So my favorite Jill Pattison story is a Christmas party. Jill is not the largest individual, and we show up at the Christmas party, and there is a guy from the swim team whose chest is much bigger than Trevor's, who shows up wearing this little Santa sweater, but it's clear it is about 19 sizes too small. And Jill shows up, she says, "Isn't it great?" She goes, "We're the same size. He needed a sweater and it was mine."
It's like someone just ran through the hall being like, "I need a sweater," and she ran out with hers.
Someone give me a sweater.
Yeah.
So
I need something for this theme.
Give
it to me.
Well, very good. Hopefully,
all right, gang.
We'll have another, whether it's next year or sometime in.
We will do.
Yeah, next week or something.
Next week. There you go.
All right,
Dr.
have a good
Keller,
night,
we're
everyone.
waiting for you to have a podcast, and we will always
do that.
Yes, podcast, much appreciated.
I'll talk to my Spotify.
Anything that you talk about, I would listen to. So it's
There
just
you
really
go.
been a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to next time. So.
All right, gang.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Have a great night.
Night,
Bye-bye.